Welcome to Passive Aggressive Income. This program may contain strong language. The content may not be suitable for audiences under the age of 17. We understand many of our listeners may not agree with all of our personal viewpoints. We in no way, shape, or form mean to be offensive to anyone. Our show notes will provide all of our source material included for each episode. Now let's get passive aggressive.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Passive Aggressive Income. We're your hosts, Mims and Lexi. This week, we are getting back to our roots. We're diving into a real estate topic that Mims is going to take us through. She's talking about how to manage a rental property. So both the building itself and the people who live in it.
Yeah, so this episode is for the people interested in investing in real estate and being completely hands-on. I am here to break down what it means to manage a rental property, and by that I mean managing the building itself and the people who live in it. So let's just give a general overview of what hands-off means. With the hands-off approach, that means that you will be handing your real estate portfolio over to a manager or a management company. The actual tenants do not concern you. What concerns you is the big picture, how you acquire the property, how to maximize your return on your investment, and how to keep the property long-term, if that's your goal. And you bring that concept and idea to your management team, and then they execute it on their end. Hands-on is pretty self-explanatory. It's the opposite of that. You are running the day-to-day operations plus executing the big picture.
So that's both what Mims and I do. We're both pretty hands-on investors where we're managing the day-to-day. We're if we're not doing it ourselves, we're hiring the people to do whatever needs to be done.
Right. So what we do as far as managing tenants is a laundry list of things. And I am going to give you a full rundown of what that means. So from the moment you list a property, review the applications, conduct the property tours, and get the lease signed by the new tenant, you have already begun the process. Once they have moved into the property, it is your job to be their resource, there as a resource when it comes to the following: how to set up their utilities. Remember, have them give you confirmation of them putting the utilities in their name before handing them the keys. You, as a property owner, will get stuck with the bill if they never pay it or never put it in their name. So make sure that you get that confirmation before you give them the unit. And I know that I mentioned that in a previous episode. I just think it's really important to practice this for every unit. It is important that you set the tone for how you want the unit maintained. What the rules are when it comes to making cosmetic alterations. Are they allowed to pick out their own paint colors? Are they allowed to tile their floors? Are they allowed to garden? These are all things you need to think about and decide on before any tenant moves in. Then make it crystal clear with them verbally and on the lease. And even when you've been really clear about what you are expecting of them, they tend to do their own thing. I remember walking into one of the units when I was doing an inspection, and they had painted the bedroom ceiling a dark maroon color, even though in the lease it stated that they couldn't do that. So just make sure that you're being on top of it and super clear.
Right. And then have systems in place where if something like that happens, you walk into your a unit that you're renting and the walls are a different color when you said painting's not allowed, then make sure you have a process of how to go forward with that. So you're not just like, oh shit, like, what do I do now? That wasn't supposed to happen. Like, fuck.
Right, exactly. And that's what we like to call a lease violation. And those are fun, especially when you tell them that it is a lease violation and you give them some sort of you notice that they need to remedy it before the next phase of the plan of action happens. So next, let's talk about you being the go-between when anything that concerns the city, like if for some reason a power line falls through the window or the tenants aren't picking up after their pets outside, you will be the one having to deal with the city or town directly since you are the property owner. They will not be calling the tenants to discuss any of that. They will be calling you directly. Anything to do with the integrity of the structure, for example, the building is on fire, the pipes have burst, the bathroom has flooded, the ceilings has collapsed, one of the stairs has caved in. You, as the landlord and as the manager, are going to be the ones who figures out how to fix it or is the one fixing it themselves. So making sure that you are on top of any maintenance calls and keeping up with the integrity of the structure is something that you should be on top of really quickly. Don't leave these things up to, weeks before you respond to them.
Yeah, especially anything to do with like water. You want to get that taken care of like ASAP. And it's not only for the sake of your tenants having to deal with their house falling apart, but the longer you leave it, the more damage you'll have, and that's costly. And after all, this is an investment, so make sure you are taking care of your investment and fixing things when they come up.
Right. And I know I've mentioned this in a previous episode of welcome baskets. On top of welcome baskets, what I do is make sure that each bathroom in the unit has a liner and a shower curtain, because I have learned that if you do not get one, they either won't have one or have one that will be too small for the tub that they have. And then we, as the property owner and manager, have to figure out what we're going to do with the damage that has been caused because of said water that has gone from the tub to the floor in the bathroom. So just make sure that you're being mindful of all these things. I know that's a step that I take that not a lot of people do, but it's something to think about because tenants don't think about these things, and it's your property, and you're going to be the one that is going to have to pay for the repairs. So just a tip.
I think that's a really good tip, specifically with showers, because the duplex that I'm living in right now, on the main floor and the upper unit, which I'm living in, the tub is only two-sided, so only where the shower comes out and then the one side. And the previous tenants had just a regular size shower curtain that didn't go around both sides. And the floor was very soft and squishy, and we
Yes.
had to rip it all out and replace the subfloor. And that could have been prevented if either what our solution was putting up a glass panel that doesn't move, so therefore the water's not coming out, or just getting like some sort of weirdly long shower curtain that doesn't
Right.
water onto the floor. So I actually love that you do that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I have learned my lessons. So moving on, if there are lease violations like we were just talking about occurring and one tenant is calling and texting to report it, remember this is different from they looked at me funny in the driveway, do something about it. What you deal with is things that pertain to lease violations. You are not the referee. You are not there to babysit. If there are valid things that are going on in the unit, like they are abusing drugs, I can hear them, beating each other up through the walls, or they're not picking up poop outside, or they're blocking the driveway every single day and I can't get out. Like, these are things that are violating the lease, and that is something that you are going to have to address. And it's not fun, but it's something that you're going to have to do if you're hands-on. You will be the one collecting the rent, making sure it is paid on time, adding late fee penalties when it's required, and going through the eviction process if they fail to pay their rent or they have refused to leave the premises after giving them a termination of their lease, or if you are, giving them some sort of 5-day violation as far as their lease violations and they haven't remedied it, and so you are going through the eviction process. These are all things that you're going to have to handle, whether you know the law or not, unless you hire an attorney to represent you in court. I've gone through the eviction process, not for my own properties, but through the management company that I worked for previously, and I was actually the one who did the whole process besides going to court. That was not something that I did, but I know that the person that did go to court wasn't an attorney or anything like that. So it's very uh it's something that you can do on your own. You can definitely call an attorney for advice if something that you don't know is happening, but it's really straightforward when you get there to that point. If you get there, I'm hoping that you don't. So, however, when a person is struggling, it is in your best interest as a landlord to be able to give them resources that could help them financially in your area. For example, in our area in Wisconsin, we have resources like Levin, Advocab, St. Vincent's de Paul, and the WIRO program that will help with a portion or the full rent if the tenant qualifies for their mini grants. If you have a good tenant and they, got injured or they've been missing work because of an illness or something along those lines, and they're, talking to you about paying their rent late and it's, November 15th and you know that it's due in 15 days, it is your responsibility to give them these resources so that they don't get behind and that they don't lose their home because of these things that have been, making them fall behind. And it's just, you want to work with the good tenants as much as you can. Not all of them are perfect, but if you have good renters, you want to keep them as long as you can.
Yeah, and especially if they're coming to you ahead of time and saying, "Hey, I know that I'm in this situation and, things are a little bit tough right now. Can we work together on this?" That's a really good sign. They want to
Mm.
work with you. They're not just going to not pay rent and then that's it and they don't care. So making sure that you're like a safe place to go to
Mm-hmm.
when tenants have issues like that going on in life will just make the whole process a lot smoother. And when you can provide these types of resources, then that's just more points in your court because you're a landlord that, maybe they move out, then they're like, yeah, I recommend them. And that then you don't have vacancies and things like that. So just being able to provide those resources and being able to be a person for them that they feel like they can come to.
Right. And then on the flip side of that, if you provide them with resources and for some reason they are just not following through and you have to go through the eviction process, you can also say, Judge, I have given them resources well before the rent was due. I was trying to be helpful. I was, beyond what I'm supposed to be doing because, not a lot of people as landlords do that. I don't think that I've heard of many landlords giving them like a laundry list of links of where to apply for grants or anything like that. So showing that if you get to that point in court, I have these receipts on me trying to help them before it got to this point, it does work in your favor as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So you are also responsible for keeping up with market rent. So what does that mean? Market rent is what your unit would list for rent on the market right now. How do you find out what market rent is? That is a good question. Look at comps in your area. You can search two bed, two bath in the Houston area in Texas and see what other landlords have it listed and rent it out for. If you do not give your tenants regular rent increases, that are slightly below. We like to keep it slightly below so that we are still, they can see, oh, other places are going for 900, but they're giving it to me for 800. Oh, they're working with me because they appreciate that I'm here and a good renter. It is way better than not giving them any rent increases and then out of, for 5-10 years, and then all of a sudden you give them a rent increase because you see that you've been charging them $400 and now a 2-bedroom in this area can go for $800 and now you've shot up to that market rent. It's going to be shell shocking for them. So make sure that you do it when you're renewing their leases along with their terms and making sure that it is an appropriate amount as well.
Yeah, it's not only just like you think these are good tenants. I don't need to raise the rent each year to keep up with the market rents or whatever.
Right.
And like if all of a sudden you realize like, oh, I actually should be charging way more and then you increase it by a huge amount, then that's actually not doing them any favors. And I'm sure they would rather have like incremental raises each
Yes.
year than like the big shell shock. And that's really just kind of like unethical.
Right. Yeah. So making sure that it doesn't have to be every year,
Hmm.
maybe every 2 years, maybe whatever feels right to you, but keeping it at the lowest and then jumping up to what you know that you can get for the unit when a person has been there for that long of a time is just really brutal to do. So make sure that you are being mindful of that.
Right. And you'll also want to make sure that you check with whatever city you're in that you're renting. If they have any sort of rent increase caps, make sure that you're
Mm.
not exceeding those. I know that was a big thing in the Twin Cities in the last year where we had rent control that
Oh yeah.
passed and then it was changing where it was like 3%.
Yeah.
You can only raise it 3% a year with like no exceptions. And now it's kind of like 8%, and there's some exceptions in there, but just make sure you're aware of what local laws you have.
Such a good point. I love that. I know that Wisconsin, we don't have that. We're really landlord friendly. So anybody that wants to become a landlord, I highly suggest that you start here first.
Yeah, the Twin Cities is a bit more tenant friendly. And, in a way, that's good, especially for people that are renting. Sometimes it
Yeah.
makes my life a little bit difficult, but ultimately, we want to provide housing that's ethical and
Mm,
good for everybody. So, pros and cons.
yes. Also making sure to do yearly inspections, kind of like rent increases, you want to keep up with that. Making sure that you are noting the maintenance issues along with the condition of the unit and to see if they have sneaked in any of those precious little pets without your green light, which they love to do. I know that me as a renter before I was a landlord, I snuck a pet in
Me
and
too.
I got away with it.
Me
And,
too.
I if I can do it, if Lexi can do it, you know that your tenants are going to be doing it. So making sure that you um, are following your lease agreement if you allow pets that when you find that they have one, making sure that they are able to keep it. But now moving forward, they're going to be charged the pet rent. They're going to be charged that fee that they should have paid before they moved in the pet. Um, and for me, I love being a pet friendly landlord because I think that now not a lot of people allow pets, and that just makes me as a landlord stand out, especially because I rent to people with bully breeds as well. I've had a lot of people telling me, oh, I've applied at like 10 different places, but they turn me away because I have a German Shepherd or I have a pit bull or I have a Rottweiler. And I'm like, I don't care what you have as long as they don't, chew a hole through the wall. And if they do, that's going to be something you're going to have to pay anyways. So I think that really makes you stand out from the crowd of landlords.
Yeah, I think a good tip in general, whether it's allowing pets and allowing breeds that a lot of other landlords don't allow, or if you're doing something like midterm rentals, it's kind of just about finding your niche in
Mhm.
a really big real estate market and going forward with that and being able to market yourself saying, hey, I provide this thing that other people don't, or I allow
Mm,
this, and
mhm.
that will just make you more successful.
Right. Lastly, you are the person who is left to fill the unit once they have decided to move out. You will be a part of the final inspection, the security deposit disbursement, documenting the condition of the unit, making sure their account has been paid up before they leave, and making sure that the unit is move-in ready, which means cleaning, repairs, or even a flip. So you are there from the beginning until the very end, and then it's a whole repeat cycle. And I'm just going to finish off with a few pieces of advice here. You are not their friend, you are their landlord. You have made a business transaction with them, and just because they live in your property that you own, that does not mean in any way that this is personal. That doesn't mean that you can't have a heart and show compassion. Just know the difference. If a tenant is late once in the 3 years they have been renting from you, don't treat them the way that a tenant that has been late every single month, um, you would treat them differently, of course, because they have showed you that I am responsible, but things happen, rather than the other one shows a consistency and being late and not being mindful of when things are due. Just because you are the landlord and an active property manager does not give you the right to be a bully. I know that I've seen a lot of landlords take that position of being a bully or a dictator or just being more involved than you should be. And getting weird with that. So there are legal ramifications for not keeping up with maintenance calls, changing the locks on people without going through the court system. I know people have done that as landlords, and you will get your shit tossed if you go to court for that. If you don't go through the eviction process and you just kick them out, move their stuff out, change the locks, and they're left with nowhere to go without going through the proper steps, you, my friend, are fucked.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of people can get into positions of power, and being a
Oh, yeah.
landlord is like a position of power because you're providing someone with housing and they're
Yes.
relying on you to give them a place to stay that is safe and clean and all of the things, but making sure that you still have this separation in your mind, like just because you own property, you're not better than them for renting. I mean,
Right.
everyone has their reasons for renting versus owning property, and keeping that in check. And also because there is sort of this like inherent, I guess, like power dynamic, that's also another reason why you shouldn't be friends with them.
Right.
It's just weird. That's why I like to keep like business separate from family too. It can be
Yes.
hard if like a family member needs housing, but
Yes.
I would really suggest being careful about that before renting to family or friends.
Yes, I am a huge advocate for not doing so, unless there's like extreme circumstances. Then I know that in my heart, I couldn't turn anybody that I love away. However, if I just do it because my friend is just looking, and then I say, "Oh, I have something open," it's it's going to get really dicey if you can't get along in a business aspect or in a business environment. So make sure that you are really thinking things through before you bring in a personal relationship into a business relationship.
Or even make a business relationship into a personal relationship. When I
Yes.
bought this duplex, the tenants who were in the unit that I'm currently living in now, they were about my age and they were really cool people. And I would have loved to be friends with them, but it just wasn't appropriate. And
Yeah.
so even though you're like, yeah, my tenants are super cool and they were great the whole time, it's still just like, keep that separation.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that you can't be friendly. Like I have lived in the majority of my properties, and you're bound to have conversations, you're bound to have, your dogs playing together outside, and but keep it casual. Don't be, going to them crying about your boyfriend or about things that are happening at work or anything like that. Like know the balance of it. Like you can be friendly, you can be casual and have like a conversation or two, but you can't go into their house and have dinner with them, it's just like not ethical in my eyes.
Yes, for sure.
And you want to do this because you're a good person, but also because tenants talk and go online and share their experiences. So just make sure to keep that in mind. That being said, you don't have to tolerate abuse either. If you have a disrespectful, late rent paying, lease violating tenant that is just being a menace, exercise your right to terminate their lease with a 28-day notice. This can only be done when they are on a month-to-month tenancy. When they are locked in a year lease, you have to evict them through the court system. Like I mentioned before, you can't just change the locks and remove their things. I have experienced many lease terminations, and some think it's not legal, and some want to avoid going to court altogether, so they comply and leave willingly. Just know it is under Wisconsin State Statute 704.19 for Wisconsin, of course. You would have to look into what it is under for your state and if it is legal in your state as well. I don't know what it is for you, Lexi.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure because I'm not really dealing with long-term tenants. So,
Okay.
yeah, things that I haven't, fingers crossed, haven't had to experience thus far and hopefully won't have to at any time in the future.
That's totally fair. Yeah. And that is a bridge that you would cross if you even need to cross it. So don't even worry about
For
it.
sure.
Also, keeping office hours, even if you don't have a physical office, as I mentioned before, this is a business and businesses have hours of operation. So don't be going on a back and forth text exchange at 11 p.m. It's unprofessional and it shows you have no boundaries.
Unless it's an emergency, of course.
Correct, correct. If it's just like, oh, there's a bunch of twigs in my lawn. Can you like come pick this up? And it's at 11 o'clock, you can definitely save that for 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. the next morning.
For sure.
Make sure everything is well documented. Always keep pictures, the completed forms, and all electronic communication. So what's the saying? Proof or it never happened? Because if you end up in a court situation, people tend to lie. And if you don't have things to back it up, or if you don't have, I know people that are, older landlords that still like don't have physical leases. They have the first original lease, but they've never renewed it since. And that could be, that could put you in a pickle if you end up in a court setting because they could say, well, you know what? I never re-signed a lease, so there's really nothing that holds me to these lease violations that are coming my way, or nothing has my name on it. And I've seen a lot of people get away with things that way. So making sure that everything is signed, dated, captured, and filed away is to your best advantage in a situation that way.
And if for some reason you are wanting to take a laxed approach like that, where you're like, well, I don't really need them to re-sign every year, then make sure in your original lease you have verbiage that says this lease auto renews and they sign it, and then, say that like all of the rules and regulations apply even after the 1 year mark, and that you need X, Y, and Z for them to move out. And like this just constitutes as like a continuing lease. Make sure that's very clear.
Yes. I would also like to give a tip that giving out your personal phone number is not a terrible thing to do, but there is a way to class it up and separate it from your personal life. My husband and I use a Google phone number that alerts us and logs all communication through that account. So it goes to our email, and obviously it goes to that phone number, and it's stored that way. They gave us a phone number and we were able to talk and text right from our phone. So our actual phone that we use every day, no need to go get a separate work phone. Plus, whenever you hand out flyers or business cards or posting a listing or have like a for rent sign in the front lawn, you don't have to give the world your private phone number. Which will help, with the weirdos, the randos, and all of that. So keeping it separated is a nice touch when it comes to this type of business.
I didn't know you could do that. That's a hot tip.
Yes, it is. I love the Google texting and phone number, and it you can get a local number too, so it's not like you're calling from South Carolina or anything like that. So it does make it very simple, and like I said, it does make it a little bit classed up.
Yeah, I love that.
So one of the things that I have had to learn is telling my tenants their piddly arguments or their beefs between themselves. We are not their therapists or their parents. We are not here to play favorites or be the refs. We are simply here to resolve issues concerning the property itself or any lease violations. I know that if you deal with people, you're going to deal with their personalities and their problems, and some are more easygoing than others. So making sure that you draw the line in the sand of what you're going to tolerate and what you're going to, insert yourself into from the get is really important. Lastly, I know I just threw out a bunch of information to you. I hope that you are able to re-listen to this, maybe even take notes for the people that are interested in owning a rental and being hands-on or are a hands-on investor, because I know this is a lot of information. But lastly, when you are feeling like managing the amount of tenants you have has started to become too much to handle, more than you can take on, or you just can't separate your personal feelings, then it's time to hand it off to professionals. There is zero shame in that fact. In fact, it is more positive for you to delegate things off than to white knuckle through it because you hate it so much. It just I think that putting your hands up and saying, I'm done, I've done as much as I can up until this point, and then giving it over to somebody that it's their job to do so, is not an L. You're definitely not a failing at anything. You're just deciding for yourself what you are capable mentally and physically and, in a time sense are able to do. So really no shame in that.
Yeah, and I know that I have a little bit of like a control thing where
Yes.
I have my processes, I have my systems, I like things to be done a certain way. You
Yes.
can start handing off things slowly. You don't need to hand everything over at once. You can do it incrementally until, in a way that feels comfortable for you until you feel like you are back to a more manageable work space where it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, and also giving whoever is going to manage it an outline of how you want it ran. What is the approach? Are you like no bullshit type of person and you don't want anything to fly, or are you more empathetic and you will give like a three strikes and you're out, or like giving them an outline of how you want your property ran is going to be helpful for you to know that they have that and for them to know how they are expected to manage your property.
Right, for sure. Well, I feel like this is super helpful. I know that that was a lot of information, but if you are either in the category of A, wanting to start your real estate journey and own properties and manage tenants, or B, you have properties and you are managing tenants, but it's getting to be a little bit too much and a bit overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
think this episode kind of walks through like all of the many different responsibilities that you'll have as a landlord. And that way people can take this, learn from it, and make decisions on how they want to go forward with managing their rentals.
Absolutely. That's so well said. And I am going to, or we're going to have our, the things that we've talked about. I'm going to have all the resources as far as financial resources in Wisconsin in our show notes for everybody that is a landlord or even a tenant in Wisconsin that could benefit from it. I think it's a really good thing to even on a yearly basis just send out via email just saying, hey, because a lot of tenants don't like to communicate that they're struggling and they're scraping by. So sending that out maybe once a year and saying, here are some resources if there is something that were to happen, and if they take advantage of it, that's great. So we're going to have that in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you, Mims, for all of the helpful information. We hope that our listeners find it helpful, whether you're a landlord, a prospective landlord, or a tenant, or just someone who thinks that like landlords don't do anything. Here's proof. We have a lot going on.
Oh my
So,
gosh. Yeah, the people that think that like can blow my ass because it's just not true.
yeah, we're busy. It's a lot. It can be
Yeah,
a lot,
for
but
sure.
also very rewarding.
Yes. Well, thank you guys so much for sticking with us on this episode. Make sure to rewind and take notes if you didn't catch everything. I know it was a lot. And make sure to stay tuned for next week's episode. Lexi has a really great topic that she's going to be sharing.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye. Passive Aggressive Income was written, recorded, edited, and produced by co-hosts and creators Mims and Lexi. We truly want to thank our listeners, collaborators, friends, and family that continuously support us for all the love we receive. If you enjoy our show, please give us a glowing rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram to see what we are up to. For any inquiries, please email passiveaggressiveincome2023@gmail.com. Episodes of Passive Aggressive Income are available wherever you listen to podcasts, so make sure to subscribe and like us on your favorite streaming platform.